Chaos in the Real Housewives universe doesn't usually start at 30,000 feet. But this time, the turbulence began long before the plane ever left the ground. Meredith Marks has been wrapped in a storm of confusion, accusations, and wild retellings after episode 13 of The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City dropped. And what happened on that crossover trip with the Below Deck Down Under cast has turned into one of the most twisted, exaggerated, and contradictory Housewives storylines in recent memory. But here's the part fans didn't expect. The more the cast talks about it, the less the story seems to make sense. And Meredith says that's exactly the point. Before we dive deeper into every detail, before we unspool the rumors, analyze the cast's claims, and break down how this airplane fiasco ballooned into a full-scale storyline, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel, because what you're about to hear is packed with the kind of behind-the-scenes truths Bravo didn't show you. It all begins at BravoCon 2025, where Meredith finally had the opportunity to confront the narrative that has been spiraling out of control. She didn't come in defensive. She didn't show up to clear her name with desperation. What she did instead was deliver a calm, calculated message for fans who have been watching the chaos unfold. She said, "It depends on how swift they are. If they're intelligent, they realize that the story from the plane doesn't add up." A bold statement, and one that immediately shifted the energy in the room. According to Meredith, the version of the events being repeated by her castmates isn't just exaggerated, it's structurally impossible. She implied that what viewers have heard in confessionals is less a timeline and more a game of broken telephone, a handful of retellings passed around by people who were too emotional, too chaotic. This entire situation traces back to Brittney Bateman, a new face who walked into the group with a viral TikTok rumor in her pocket and a confidence level that rivaled housewives who've been around for years. She claimed she saw a video alleging Meredith's husband Seth was having an affair, and instead of pulling Meredith aside privately, she dropped it into the group like a grenade. With cameras rolling, with castmates watching. During a crossover vacation that was already packed with pressure. Meredith denied the accusation instantly, fiercely, and without hesitation. And that should have been the end of it. But the whispers didn't end there. They followed the women off the boat, into the airport, and eventually onto that now infamous flight back to Salt Lake City. According to Heather Gay, Meredith was yelling and screaming and crying in the airport, shaken by Brittney's decision to bring up her marriage. Angie Katsanevas added that Meredith was making a scene, suggesting Meredith didn't even realize how she was behaving. But here's where things begin to drift into murky territory. Not a single second of airport footage was shown. No clips, no blurry cell phone videos, nothing. Just confessionals, recollections, and dramatic retellings. Brittney claimed that once she boarded the plane, she found herself sitting directly in front of Lisa Barlow and Meredith, a seating arrangement she described like a trap. Then she dropped the claims that sent fans spiraling. Someone grabbed her seat, someone shook it, wine spilled on her, and hair was pulled. A list of accusations that read like an in-flight brawl. Yet, strangely, no other passenger, crew member, or security report ever came up to support the story. Whitney Rose chimed in, saying Meredith was talking so loudly the entire first class could hear her. Lisa contributed her own moment, admitting she told Brittney to just give her the fang TikTok. But even Lisa's contribution sounds more like frustration than chaos. The only person who says the drama didn't happen the way the others tell it is the person at the center of it all. Meredith insists she never spoke to Brittney, never touched her, never did anything that could even be perceived as physical. And she delivered one of the most unshakable lines of the season. "If my behavior had been inappropriate, I would have been arrested by an air marshal." And she's right. Airline incidents are taken seriously. Passengers don't get warnings. They get consequences. The deeper you look into the story, the more everything starts to feel like a psychological maze, one where every cast member remembers a slightly different version of what happened. And that alone tells you something important. When the truth is clear, everyone tells the same story. When the truth is messy, emotional, or convenient, suddenly the details start shape-shifting. By the time the women returned home, the plane incident had evolved into 5 different narratives, each with its own level of intensity. Some cast members described chaos, others described tension, others hinted at physical contact, while some only mentioned raised voices. And Brittney, the epicenter of it all, continued to insist that she was shaken, literally and figuratively, by the interaction. But here's the piece that stops viewers cold. Meredith says she didn't even look at Brittney during that flight, let alone touch her. She claims she spent the entire time venting quietly to Lisa about the frustration, betrayal, and confusion the rumor caused her. She denies the wine spill. She denies touching the seat. She denies any physical interaction. And without footage, the weight of the story falls entirely on who the audience believes. The most unusual part is that production, which normally captures even the smallest side-eye, somehow caught none of this alleged meltdown. No airport scene, no boarding conflict, no flight drama, nothing. And Housewives fans know, Bravo loves a messy travel moment. If something truly explosive happened, they wouldn't let it vanish into thin air. The absence of footage makes this story feel more like cast-driven theater than a documented event. And let's be honest, a private, unfilmed moment is the perfect breeding ground for Housewives mythology. When the cameras aren't there, the cast fills the silence with emotion, memory, and personal bias. Suddenly, a tense conversation becomes an argument. An argument becomes shouting. Shouting becomes chaos. And chaos becomes a storyline. As Meredith explained at BravoCon, the narrative doesn't add up because the pieces don't logically connect. She left viewers with a puzzle and urged them to look more closely at the corners that don't match. She implied that certain cast members used the moment to escalate tension for dramatic effect, especially those still establishing themselves within the group. After all, every new housewife needs a storyline, and nothing cements your presence like going to war with a veteran. But what Meredith didn't say, what she didn't have to say, is that the real issue isn't the plane incident at all. It's the underlying obsession her castmates seem to have with her marriage. Whether they're whispering about Seth one season or speculating about loyalty the next, the Marks marriage has become an easy target for women who want a reaction. And Meredith, who plays her cards close to her chest, frustrates them by not giving them one. The TikTok rumor wasn't the first time someone tried to poke at her relationship, but it was the first time the accusation traveled through multiple hands, fueled by social media, then dropped publicly into a crossover trip with cameras watching. For Meredith, that crossed a line, not because the rumor was believable, but because the tactic was manipulative. When the women landed back in Salt Lake City, what was supposed to be a relaxing vacation had turned into a new fracture within the group. Some women felt Meredith was overreacting. Others believed Brittney was stirring the pot intentionally, and others simply wanted to move on, but the damage was already done. The drama now lived in confessionals, retellings, and interviews, gaining more detail every time someone had a chance to talk about it. As the dust began to settle, the tension from that trip didn't quietly dissolve the way the cast hoped it would. Instead, it followed every woman back into their confessionals, their friendships, and their alliances. What happened, or what didn't happen on that plane, became a litmus test for loyalty. Suddenly, the question wasn't just about whether the rumor was true. It was about who each cast member believed, who they trusted, and who they thought was using drama to secure their place in the group. Lisa Barlow's involvement added another layer. She admitted grabbing the armrest and telling Brittney to show the TikTok, but even her account sounded more like frustration at Brittney's evasiveness than participation in any chaos. And for viewers, that tiny crack in the story reveals something telling. Even Lisa, who often sits at the center of conflict, didn't describe anything close to what Brittney claimed. No wine. No pulling. No physical altercation. Whitney, meanwhile, seemed more focused on amplifying the tension than clarifying it. Her description of Meredith, talking so loud the entire first class could hear it, felt convenient, just dramatic enough to stir the pot, not specific enough to confirm anything truly happened. Her contribution helped shape the rumor into a full-blown storyline, but when held up to the light, it carries as much ambiguity as everyone else's. And Heather Gay, always ready with a dramatic retelling, painted a picture of Meredith unraveling in the airport. Yet even she provided no evidence, no direct confrontation, no moment where Meredith actually acknowledged speaking to Brittney. Like the rest of the cast, Heather relied on impressions rather than facts. Piece by piece, every detail given by the cast points in different directions, making Meredith's claim that the story simply does not add up feel more plausible than ever. But here's where the narrative truly shifts. When Meredith addressed the situation at BravoCon, she wasn't just defending her marriage or pushing back on rumors. She was issuing a challenge. She asked the audience to think critically, to look at how the story has grown, twisted, stretched, and reshaped itself. She reminded viewers that if something truly extreme had happened, there would have been consequences, immediate ones, not gossip, not speculation, actual documented consequences. What fans are left with now is the haunting possibility that a rumor born from a TikTok video spiraled into a manufactured storyline during a cast trip, fueled by insecurity, opportunism, and the pressure to create dramatic television. And whether the women genuinely misremembered the moment or intentionally embellished it, the result is the same: a small spark turned into a wildfire that never needed to ignite. The season now stands at a crossroads. Viewers are beginning to question motivation rather than accusation. They're looking harder at who benefits from conflict and who uses confusion as a weapon. And in that introspection, the audience begins to see the real story. Not the one being told on camera, but the one being played behind the scenes. As for Meredith Marks, she remains unbothered in a way that only someone completely confident in the truth can be. She refuses to accept a narrative that was twisted into existence. She refuses to play into a storyline built on hearsay. And most importantly, she refuses to let anyone, new cast member or otherwise, weaponize her marriage for personal gain. When she said, if they're intelligent, they realize the story doesn't add up, she wasn't throwing shade. She was giving viewers the exact roadmap they needed to understand the entire situation. And now that the audience has that map, the season ahead becomes less about what happened on the plane and more about who keeps trying to convince them it did. With the truth stretched thin, the cast divided, and the rumor refusing to die, the next episodes promise something even more explosive: the unmasking of who has been manipulating the narrative all along. And when that moment comes, it won't just shake the group. It will expose the real motives behind every whisper, every retelling, and every exaggerated detail that turned a TikTok rumor into a housewives legend.